Edge of the Storm, Survival Stories from the Brink, Part 1, Ride the Wind, Hurricanes, Cyclones, Tornadoes, Rogue Waves. Chapter 1, Train Through the Hurricane. The wind had shifted. That's when Elias knew they'd gone too far. The coastal line twisted like a silver ribbon along Nigeria's southern shoreline, a marvel of engineering slicing through mangrove swamps and saltwater flats. But nature didn't give a damn about engineering. Not tonight. Hurricane Felix was supposed to veer east, out toward the Atlantic. That was the forecast, the models, the experts. But somewhere over the Gulf of Guinea, Felix changed its mind. And now Elias's high-speed passenger train, the Oasis Express, was running straight into the teeth of a Category 5 monster. The sleek white locomotive shuddered as another gust slammed into its flank. Elias tightened his grip on the throttle, eyes flicking between the rain-lashed windshield and the instrument panel. Wind speeds outside, 160 kilometers per hour and climbing. Beside him, Chica, his co-driver, leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Track flood alarms just triggered," she said, voice tight. "Which sector?" 4 kilometers ahead, Lowland Crossing." Her fingers flew over the console, pulling satellite updates. "Waters breached the causeway." Elias swore under his breath. The Lowland Causeway was the most exposed stretch on the route. Marsh on both sides. Nothing but flat salt flats and shallow water stretching to the sea. It was designed to withstand heavy rains. But not this. Not Felix. "We should stop," Chica urged. Elias didn't answer. Behind them in the 12-carriage train, over 400 passengers were crammed together, watching the storm batter the windows. Tourists, business people, families. Half of them oblivious, half glued to their phones, watching Felix's satellite images spiral across their screens. Stopping in open marshland would be suicide. If the embankments gave way, the floodwaters would swallow them whole. But push forward and maybe the tunnel, a kilometer-long stretch carved through a bluff of solid rock. It was the only safe shelter between here and Port Harcourt. Elias made the call. "We keep moving," he said. Chica hesitated. "Elias?" "We keep moving," he repeated, voice firm. "Full throttle." The train surged forward, wheels humming against steel rails slick with rain. The headlights carved through the downpour, but the landscape was already vanishing behind sheets of water and flying debris. Outside, the marsh swayed violently. Trees bent to impossible angles. The distant estuary, once calm, was now a churning black expanse speckled with foam and fragments of shattered boats. "Wind's shifting again," Chica warned. "It's wrapping inland." Elias adjusted the throttle. The Oasis Express strained, a beast of metal and electricity fighting the rising storm. It wasn't built for this. The aerodynamic shell, the magnetic track guidance, all designed for speed, efficiency, not for a hurricane's raw, unfiltered rage. A tremor vibrated through the floor. Elias felt it in his bones. "Did you feel that?" he asked. Before Chica could respond, the emergency panel lit up crimson. Warning klaxons shrieked. "Track sensor failure," she read, eyes wide. "We've lost comms with the causeway section." Elias's mouth went dry. That meant one of two things. Either water levels had shorted the sensors, or the track itself was compromised. The windshield lit up with lightning. For a fraction of a second, the entire marshland was painted stark white. And there it was, the causeway ahead, barely visible through the rain. Except it wasn't right. The embankment on the left was gone. A breach. A torrent of seawater, mud, and debris was spilling across the rails, turning the gleaming track into a submerged, writhing mess. "Brake?" Chica asked, hand hovering. Elias did the math in his head. Speed, 200 kilometers per hour. Distance to the flood zone, 100 meters. Stopping in time? Impossible. "No," he said, voice low. "Throttle." For a heartbeat, Chica froze. Then understanding flashed across her face. It was a gamble, a deadly one. But their only shot. Lose momentum, and the train would bog down in the water, dead on the track. But keep the speed. Maybe, just maybe, the train's mass and velocity would carry them through. Elias pushed the throttle to its limit. The Oasis Express roared. The carriages groaned. The magnetic guidance whined. And the passengers behind them screamed as the train hurtled into the flooded causeway. For a moment, everything went silent. Water exploded around them. The wheels hissed, traction wavered. The train listed, tilting slightly as the breached embankment tried to swallow them. "Steady!" Elias shouted, gripping the controls. The console flickered. The floor lurched beneath them. Mud and debris pounded the undercarriage. A sickening screech of metal. Chica's hand shot to the emergency stabilizer. "Keep her level," Elias barked. The train bucked, fought, and somehow, impossibly, burst through the worst of the flood. The causeway narrowed. The flooded section vanished behind them, swallowed by darkness and storm. Ahead, the tunnel loomed. Elias barely breathed until the nose of the train slipped inside. Concrete walls replaced rain-lashed glass. The shriek of the storm dulled to a muted roar beyond the tunnel mouth. Safe, for now. Elias eased the throttle, guiding the train to a halt inside the tunnel's protective embrace. His heart thundered in his chest. His palms were slick with sweat. Chica exhaled shakily beside him. In the rearview monitor, they could see passengers pressed to the windows, wide-eyed, some crying, some filming. The miracle of survival recorded in shaky phone footage. Outside, Felix raged unchecked, ripping through the coastal plain. "We hold here," Elias said, voice steady despite the adrenaline still thrumming in his veins. "Until this bastard passes." Chica nodded, glancing at the storm beyond. Neither of them spoke of the obvious. The breach in the embankment. The damage to the track. The fact that Project Tempest's latest models had been wrong again. The storms weren't following rules anymore. And deep down, Elias feared they never would again. Chapter 2. Twister Town. The sirens were already wailing when Mara shoved her shoulder against the gas station door and stumbled inside, rain clinging to her like wet plastic. "Back room," the clerk shouted from behind the counter. "Everyone in the back!" Mara barely registered him. Her eyes were on Toby, wide-eyed, 7 years old, clutching his backpack like it held his entire life. Maybe it did. Inside were 2 toy cars, his inhaler, and the picture he'd drawn of their house. The house that, if the forecast was right, wouldn't be standing much longer. A roar swept over the flat Kansas plains outside. Not thunder, not wind. Something heavier, something alive. "Tornadoes down!" someone yelled. Mara grabbed Toby's hand and ran. The back room was already filling with people. A delivery driver, 2 teenage cashiers, a retired couple from the RV parked out front, and a woman still wearing a nurse's scrubs. Mara pushed them all aside and crouched in the corner, pulling Toby close. "Where's the cellar?" she asked, scanning the walls. "There isn't one," the nurse replied grimly. "It's just this." A gas station stockroom. Metal shelves, crates of bottled water, potato chip boxes stacked to the ceiling. No basement. No concrete storm shelter. Just drywall, fluorescent lights, and prayer. Outside, the sky was the color of bruised steel, clouds boiling, twisting, pulling themselves into ropes of destruction. Mara's phone buzzed in her pocket. She yanked it out with shaking fingers. "Tornado emergency. Seek shelter." Immediately confirmed multiple touchdowns. "Near Elkwood, stay low. Stay away from windows." Her chest tightened. Elkwood was 3 miles away. The wind outside sounded closer than that. Toby clung to her. "Mom, is it gonna hit us?" Mara hesitated. She wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him no, that they'd be fine, that the storm would skip them like it always had. But the look in the nurse's eyes, the fear in the delivery driver's clenched jaw, the wail of the sirens still cutting through the air outside, they all told the same story. "We're gonna stay low and we're gonna be smart," she said, instead, brushing damp curls from his forehead. "That's how we get through this." A flash lit up the room, not lightning. Debris slamming into the storefront glass. A cracking sound, sharp and wrong. The clerk stumbled in, pale. "Window's gone," he said. "Whole front's gone." Before anyone could respond, the freight train sound hit. It wasn't a train, but that's how they all described it afterward. A deep rolling roar like steel wheels on rails, only bigger, meaner. The walls groaned. The metal roof screeched, tugged by invisible hands. Mara pressed Toby's head to her chest. "Stay down!" the nurse shouted, flattening herself against the floor. The fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing like angry hornets. Then, silence. An unnatural stillness. The kind that made your skin crawl. The kind that only came before something truly terrible. A freight truck, still parked outside, lifted off the ground like it weighed nothing. The windows imploded. Glass rained down like frozen needles. The back wall buckled inward. Screams filled the room. Mara threw herself over Toby. The roof peeled back, metal shrieking into the storm. For one frozen heartbeat, Mara saw the sky, green-black, swirling, monstrous, and the finger of the tornado descending like the hand of God. It hit. The room erupted. Wind roared through, carrying debris, shelves, people. A crate of bottled water smashed beside her. The nurse vanished from view. The delivery driver clung to a steel beam, face twisted with terror. The noise was deafening. Wood cracked. Metal groaned. Somewhere, something exploded. Mara held onto Toby with everything she had. The tornado moved through like a living thing, a predator ripping the flesh off the building. Then, as suddenly as it came, it passed. The wind dropped. The roar faded into the distance, replaced by sirens and the hiss of rain. Mara opened her eyes. The back wall was gone. The ceiling half stripped. Shelves mangled. The front of the gas station obliterated. But they were alive. Toby whimpered beneath her. His backpack gone, but his small hands gripping her shirt. "We're okay," Mara whispered, more to herself than him. "We're okay." The delivery driver staggered to his feet, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The nurse crawled out from beneath a collapsed shelf, coughing. Outside, what was left of Elkwood sprawled across the prairie like broken toys. Telephone poles snapped. Cars overturned. Houses flattened. A massive scar carved across the landscape, where the twister had raked its claws. And worse, in the distance, the clouds were still twisting. Another funnel, larger than the first, dipping toward the ground like a vengeful ghost. "Multiple touchdowns," the nurse muttered, her voice hollow. Mara helped Toby stand. Her knees shook. Her throat burned from dust and fear. "We can't stay here," the clerk said, voice cracking. "Next one hits, this place'll fold like paper." Mara didn't argue. She looked around at the others. The injured. The terrified. Ordinary people caught in nature's worst mood. They had minutes, maybe seconds. Toby's hand found hers again. "How do we get through this?" he whispered. Mara squeezed his fingers tight. "Same way as before," she said, her voice low but steady. "We stay low, we stay smart. And this time they run." She led them into the storm. Chapter 3. Cargo of the Cyclone. The sea wasn't water anymore. It was walls. Captain Ramon Reyes gripped the rusted railing of the MV San Rafael, eyes fixed on the horizon. What little of it he could see between the 30-meter swells rising like liquid skyscrapers. The cargo ship groaned beneath him, steel hull flexing as another monster wave smashed across the bow. Somewhere below, in the crew quarters, the men were praying. Ramon could almost hear them over the wind. Half his crew were veterans of these waters. The others, green boys barely out of training, had never seen the South China Sea like this. No one had. Typhoon Agatha had been downgraded this morning. That's what Manila said. Satellite models showed it weakening, curling harmlessly toward Taiwan. But Ramon had sailed these waters for 30 years. He didn't need a computer model to smell lies on the wind. Agatha hadn't curled away. She'd strengthened, shifted south. And now San Rafael, 200 meters of aging steel and stacked shipping containers, was square in the center of her wrath. "Captain?" The first mate, Miguel, burst onto the bridge, rain-soaked and pale. Starboard cranes, structural failure imminent. Ramon's eyes darted to the external monitors. The starboard side was a mess. 2 cargo cranes shuddered with every wave, metal buckling. Below them, containers, dozens of them, shifted dangerously in their lashings. If they lost the cranes, the containers would follow. If the containers went, they'd tear open the deck like tinfoil. The hull wouldn't hold. Ramon turned back to the window as another wave reared up, blotting out the sky. It hit like a battering ram. The ship tilted. Alarms screamed. The old girl groaned, protesting every rivet. "We can't ride this out," Miguel said, voice tight. "We have to alter course." "Alter course to where?" Ramon snapped, wiping salt spray from his face. "You want to broadside those waves? We'll roll like a bottle." Miguel hesitated, then lowered his voice. "We scuttle the cargo." Ramon froze. It wasn't just freight in those containers. It was their livelihood. Electronics bound for Europe. Medical supplies for Singapore. Food aid pallets for Vietnam. And Ramon knew, hidden among them, unmanifested cargo. Smuggled goods. Quiet deals between shipping agents and port officials. That's how the company stayed afloat. How the crew got paid on time. Dump the cargo, they'd survive the storm. But when they limped into port empty-handed, there'd be hell to pay. Another wave slammed the hull. The floor lurched. Miguel stumbled, grabbing a railing. "We lose the cranes, we lose the deck," Miguel pressed. "We lose the deck, we sink, cargo or no cargo." Ramon's jaw clenched. 30 years at sea. He'd outrun pirates. Dodged customs officials. Weathered storms from Cebu to Cape Town. But Agatha wasn't a storm. She was war. He grabbed the radio. "All crew, brace station, prepare to jettison starboard cargo." A long pause crackled over the comms. Then, one by one, voices replied. A quiet chorus of understanding. Fear, but no protest. The men would do what they had to, or die. Ramon fought his way outside, Miguel close behind. The wind was a living thing, howling with the voice of the storm gods. Rain whipped across the deck like needles. The steel surface rolled beneath their feet as the ship crested another towering wave. Welders scrambled to cut the crane cables. Others secured what they could. Lightning forked overhead, illuminating the chaos. Containers groaned, straining against their lashings. "Cut it!" Ramon bellowed. A final hiss of metal, and the cables snapped. The crane collapsed sideways, tearing through its mount. Containers tumbled into the churning sea like dominoes. Some burst on impact. Electronics, crates, plastic sheeting, all swallowed by black water and foam. The San Rafael bucked, but the tilt eased. The hull groaned in relief. For a heartbeat, it worked. Then a rogue wave rose from the depths. It wasn't part of the storm rhythm. It was taller, meaner. A freak wall of water, 35 meters high, advancing like a liquid cliff. "Hold on!" Miguel screamed. Ramon barely had time to grab the railing. The wave hit. Steel screamed. The ship rolled to port almost sideways. Containers snapped free. 2 crewmen vanished overboard, swept into the abyss. Saltwater exploded across the deck, smashing into Ramon like a fist. His grip slipped. His shoulder slammed against the bulkhead. The ship groaned, shuddered, then righted itself, coughing seawater like a drowning beast. Ramon lay gasping, ears ringing, heart racing. The storm raged on. The comm unit on his belt crackled. "Captain, engine room's flooded. We're losing power." Ramon staggered to his feet, wiping blood from his brow. Below them, the San Rafael listed dangerously. The engines groaned in protest. The storm was winning. Miguel's face was pale. "We can't keep her afloat." Ramon stared at the boiling black sea, at the shattered deck, the broken cranes. The lifeboat still lashed down. 30 years at sea, some choices weren't about cargo, or money, or pride. They were about who lived to see the next sunrise. "Abandon ship," Ramon said, voice raw but steady. Miguel hesitated, then nodded. The order crackled across the ship. Crew scrambled for lifeboats. Emergency beacons flickered to life. Flares streaked weakly into the storm-torn sky. Ramon was the last to leave the bridge. He watched the San Rafael, his ship, his livelihood, his sins, all of it, vanish into the churning black. The sea wasn't water anymore. It was walls. And tonight, it claimed everything.